Hey everybody, this is Melissa Dawn at the Ghostly Archives podcast. The live stream is going to start in a few moments, so I want to thank you guys for joining in and participating in this podcast. But before we start, I just want to ask you a big favor. If you guys could help the podcast grow, that would be fantastic, and it only takes a few clicks. You can do that by subscribing, liking, sharing the content, and also on the audio podcast platform. If you could, and if you listen to us over there, give the podcast 4 stars because it really helps us out a lot. Okay, so hang on just another minute or so, and I'll be right with you here on the live stream with our wonderful guest tonight. Well, welcome everybody to the Ghostly Archives live stream. I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to pop in. Hopefully you can hear me. If there's any audio or video problems, just give me a shout out and let me know so I can correct those. But I'm pretty sure I actually didn't test things, so I'm pretty sure we've got it all going on together with the audio. But if we don't, please let me know. I'm going to check the chat here. I have got hello from Jonaside and Russell Reynolds. Hello, everybody. I have a fantastic guest tonight in Jenn Dorrell. Just going to send everybody a message. Hello, Dean. We have a wonderful audience tonight. We've got people watching on X, on Facebook, on YouTube. Join in eventually with your comments and your questions. I'll pop them up sometime during the conversation. So tonight I have Jenn Dorrell on. She's a historical researcher, paranormal investigator, and intuitive. She's got a super cool TikTok channel. Love it. And we're going to talk, the paranormal investigation, time loops, stone tape theory, her, experiences and investigation. We're going to start and see where that goes. I appreciate everybody coming on in. And you know what? Let's not put this off any longer. Let's bring Jenn in. And we'll see. Hello, welcome to the show, Jenn.
Hey, how are you?
I am doing great. This is fantastic. We even got EVPs for everybody tonight. This is super cool.
Yes, I hope it works.
It's gonna work. It's gonna work. Yes. Positive thinking. Me and my husband are doing like this manifestation and the positive thinking stuff more because I got off track with that. So it's gonna work. It's gonna be good.
Yes.
So I've been watching your TikToks. I find very fascinating. I want to get to that content later and talk about it. But before we get into all the EVPs and all the experiences, I kind of want to know, who is Jenn Dorrell in relation to the ghosts and the paranormal subject? Like, what's your history and how did you get into this?
Oh, well, just by chance, I guess. I've always had crazy experiences growing up as a kid. So I was always told to take a blind eye to it, like it was nothing. But it's just something I could not ignore. When I was, 3, I would have like a shadow person in my room, could never sleep. I was always jumping in my parents' bed or my brother's bed. That lasted for many, many years. I think the very first pivotal one was when I was about 4 or 5. My grandmother came to me when I was taking a nap. Of course, at the time I did not know it was my grandmother. I was quite scared, but she reassured me and came up to me and gave me a hug and everything. And she had this glowing light behind her. And at first I was scared. And then when she got ready to leave, I didn't want her to leave. And when she left, she just looked at me and waved and seemed to walk right through this veil that had this radiant light around it, and I automatically got upset. So that was probably the big first experience for me.
How old were you again?
About 4.
4, so quite young.
Yeah. I had a lot of experiences growing up. very, very young. But I
And
grew up Baptist, so that was like a big no-no.
oh, that's a big thing with people is they sort of push it down and
Hmm.
deny it either because life gets in the way or they have a belief system that makes them feel like that's a bad experience.
Hmm.
It's
Yep.
true. 100%. I think a lot of people out there can identify with that. Did you ever live in any house that had anything, or was it just like experiencing spirits coming to you and contacting you?
Well, I would say mostly contacting me. I do remember living in a house in Mexico, Missouri, that my parents told me stories about later on, but they shushed them. But there was this, it was kind of a tri-level house. It had one section that had a garage, and then somebody built like a little apartment above it. And my parents were actually going to sleep in that area, and which meant they were going to be very far away from me. So I was scared, but they didn't stay up there very long. And so when I was little, I would always go up there, and it was just always cold and ominous, and it just never felt right. None of us would go in there and hang out. We just used it as a storage room, but it was a nice big bedroom. So
Wow.
there's that. But I had a lot of really bad experiences in that house too. But at the time, I didn't really know, didn't put the two together that it could have been that person. Because the story, I think, was that somebody supposedly killed themselves. I'm not sure though.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, and we're going to get into a lot of this stuff on theories on what it is, but I don't know. I think there's this idea that everything's one. I'm not sure I agree with everything's one thing in the paranormal, like UFOs are the same,
Yeah.
I'm not too sure because I've had the same experience of something visiting me, someone who used to be alive visiting me after they had passed on, and I don't think that's the same thing as somebody getting a UFO experience or an abduction. I
Right.
wouldn't even remotely compare it, or a
Right.
fairy.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's interesting
Yeah.
that I find those the most fascinating and real experiences that are, I don't know, I guess strong. Speak
Right. I
strong
mean,
because you know that person existed.
right. Yeah. You had that experience. And it's really hard when somebody tries to tell you, you're full of it. It didn't happen. So that's what's always rough when you're the experiencer and then somebody else doesn't experience it or understand it.
Yeah. And I also find like I start like almost gaslighting and questioning myself. Like the farther
Yeah.
away I get from the actual original experience, I'll be like,
Hmm.
well, did it happen or did it blah, blah, blah. And then I have to sit down and go and remember it almost fresh and go, no, that really happened. It wasn't just me, and I find that happens the farther away I get from the actual sort of event
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah. No,
Hmm.
I've done the same thing. Yeah. My whole
That
life. You just,
self-doubt.
and I think it makes me, for one, to be a good investigator too, because I already have the belief in it. But at the same time, it better be something really, really good because I'll dismiss it really quick.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just,
Well, and it's like I mean, there's lots of explanation for what things can be. So
yeah.
if they really, really want you to know they're there, like you
Right.
said, they better make it
Yes.
really good.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. Because a little creak isn't gonna do
Nope.
it.
Nope.
So we got a lot of people. We got 11 people in the YouTube. Please stay with us, guys, and ask your questions eventually. We got a few on Twitter. That's usually got like 30, but they'll show up. It takes some time to get in
Oh.
there, right? So you were sensitive as a child. You talk about
Mhm.
being intuitive.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. So
you
it's
can
like,
elaborate on it if you
yeah,
want,
I'm just
or is
trying to
it
think
just that?
where to begin. Um, Gosh, as a kid, it was hard for me. Just as again, I was brought up in the Baptist community, and my parents had really strong faith. Well, my family had a strong faith, and I did too as well. It's just that I questioned everything, and that was a bit bothersome for them. Um, you weren't supposed to question stuff like that, but I think that's probably the investigator in me anyways. I was already like that in the beginning, just it needed to make sense
Inquisitive.
to me.
Yeah.
Mhm. I
Well,
mean,
and it's good. I mean, it's good to question things,
yes,
but
I think it is.
I mean, if we didn't question things, there would be people who would get away with a whole lot of bunk, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that's a big gap. You were young and sensitive. When did
Mhm.
you think, oh, I want to actually start researching the paranormal and history? I mean, I find that fascinating because I love history, and part of this podcast is history because I believe
Yes.
ghosts are tied in with
Oh,
it.
for sure.
So when did that stuff, like when did you start having that fascination for history and actual investigating the paranormal?
Well, I was always interested in investigating and trying to talk to the other side from early on. It's just that I don't think it really started until all the TV shows are coming out because I didn't know anybody else interested. My friends would dismiss me and just laugh at me, and so it really started with ghost hunters showing up on the scene. So I would try to find like-minded other people. I do know in my early 20s, I was trying to learn how to do it. I was doing readings, and it was just for fun. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was tapping into, and that's when I encountered my first kind of negative entity. I don't really know what it was, but it was definitely trickster, and it knew my family, and it would present itself as my family, at least in my third eye, and that's how I would see them. And then there was one time I was doing a reading, and I thought I was doing a reading on this other girl. Come to find out, it had to do with me and an aunt, and uh, I saw my grandfather, and the next thing I know, his skin starts melting off his face. And then it dawned on me, oh, you stupid ass. Sorry. Can it's, it was horrible because I thought, I just made myself vulnerable, and it got to
Do you
me.
think it wasn't your grandfather, was
It was
something
not my
else sort of
grandfather.
mimicking? Yeah.
No, it wasn't. As soon as I came running down the stairs, because I was living in and had an attic space that was one big bedroom, and I came running down the stairs, and I just remember when I walked on this, I had a big, heater vent on the floor, and I stepped on it, and I don't know why all of a sudden that just made me think of it, but I stepped on it, and then I got the vision of what actually it was. It showed itself to me, and it looked demonic. I mean, from what you see in pictures and stuff, but I don't know if it literally was because entities do like to portray themselves as demonic because they want to scare the shit out of you. So I really don't know what it was, but it seemed to know a lot about me, which could also mean that it's always hanging out with me. It probably already knew stuff about me and was able to figure out how to.
Sort of covertly lying in wait.
Yeah.
Kind of like a demon reconnaissance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For lack of better term. I mean, they do that.
Yeah.
They do that. And it's some people think that like paranormal investigation and stuff like that opens the door for that. And I'm not sure if it's in the investigation or like a lot of people say that about Ouija boards. And I have always thought that Ouija boards of themselves can't do that, that it has to be the people. Like the people, the people have to be doing something. And I'm like, okay, well, if you just have a Ouija board sitting there, it's not doing anything. So obviously it's not the board in itself. It's like the intention of the people, I think the group dynamics. And I always think of things like almost like a mind virus. Like we're connecting to stuff. We're all connected. And we keep forgetting that. And I think we are making something happen when we connect with that. Sure. Yep. And so people are like, you shouldn't go investigate the paranormal. You shouldn't do this. A demon will show up. And I'm like, well, that depends on how you do it and what you're doing and what your mindset is.
Well, it's going to show up anywhere. It can show up at a haunted location. But I mean, if it just stays there, then I guess you're going to run into it. But it does. I think your intention has everything to do with how your investigation is going to go.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're there looking for that, then you're most likely going to experience something like that.
And like boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know, some people say a prayer that they believe gives them a protection. Some people put a bubble of light around them. Everyone has a
Yeah.
different thing, I think, that they
Mhm.
do. So that's kind of like a boundary
Mhm.
that,
Yep.
so the demons don't mess with you. You're literally
Yeah.
warning them.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So that absolved, you're saying, like, it just disappeared and you knew it wasn't your grandfather, it was this demon.
Yeah, I mean, that's what got me to stop doing it. But
Mhm.
I was kinda hooked once I realized I was getting all this validation because I had never had it before. I'd never really opened myself up. So I was getting validation like left and right. And I thought, oh, this is really cool. I really always wondered if I could do this. And then I got a big slap in the face, and I thought, well, I was scaring
Mhm.
my brother and people around me, so I just stopped. And I literally had to deal with that thing by myself. I locked myself up in my
Okay.
house. I wouldn't let my friends over. I just dealt with it, and it was trying to
Yeah.
jack with me. Yeah,
Right. It
yeah.
was when you say that, do you mean it was trying to make you afraid?
That, or it was actually trying to get into my head, like depression. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
dealt with that
Yeah.
off and on a lot my whole life. And it's to the point that now that I'm older, anytime I get an intrusive thought, like everybody gets those, but I would get
Mhm.
them so much that it was just, that's not me. So I would laugh. I
You
would
know
start
it's not
laughing
you.
at it. Yeah, I'm like, keep trying. It's not going to work. I was
Yeah.
like out loud. I probably look like a crazy person, but I would. I'm like, that's a good one. Keep going. Like I don't believe it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah,
there's nothing like that's like the whole idea of like I always feel our whole society has gone crazy because nobody wants comedy anymore. Comedy is
yeah.
like a really good humor is like a really good remedy for darkness. Really,
Hmm.
when you can laugh at something, it kind of helps pull you because you're kind of in a vibration almost, and it almost pulls you out of that vibration and lifts you higher, so it can't communicate with you. It can't
Yep.
get to you because your
Hmm.
vibration's somewhere else.
Very true. Yep.
I
I've
know.
got
I could be on crack. You can tell me if you disagree.
Oh, no, no, I agree. As long as you have your good willpower and you know that that's something that cannot affect you, you're putting a bubble around yourself just thinking that. So you're already
Yeah,
protecting yourself. They cannot hurt you. I mean, all they really wanna do is get into your head and just jack you up that way mentally.
yeah,
So that's what mentally, I'm strong that way. Now, I haven't
right.
really encountered the ones you hear all the crazy stories about. That I have not encountered, so I don't know too much on
I've
that
had a
one.
I've had a few strange things show up, but I was doing a podcast with a co-host from the United Kingdom,
Mhm.
and we were doing this, it was like a scientific experiment more than anything, that's how we were thinking of it,
Yeah.
and we were kinda thinking, "Can you manifest a topple? Like, can people make things manifest?" Now, I was working several jobs, so I left it to him.
Mhm.
And we had this cat, this ghost story of a cat that, was like a forerunner, harbinger of death. It would show ghostly cat would show up in this
Mhm.
story we told. And and it would show up and warn them of death. So we thought, well, can we make it could be a fake story, but can we focus so much intently on this figure that we actually create it? And he
Mhm.
did that stuff. I was so busy working and doing all this stuff. And then he started telling me he was seeing a shadow figure walking around. I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
whatever. I was like, whatever. And then one day I had it was morning, early morning. I had a literal, you would call it sleep paralysis
Ooh,
experience
yep,
with
I've had many of those.
it wasn't even shadowy. It was like a milky grayish color thing that climbed in and crawled on top of me. And it wasn't until I just let go and was like, "Whatever," that it disappeared, but it was, like, hissing and saying really weird,
Nice.
freaky
Mm.
things on top of me, and I just called him up and was like, "Hey, can you I think it works. I think we can stop it now." I kicked
Yeah,
it, whatever it was, out and said, "Get lost." I said, "I think we could stop this now. I'm convinced that you can do it, and you're seeing shadow people. I'm not even doing the stuff, and I just had a sleep paralysis, and that's not normal for me to have."
yeah.
So, hey, so I don't know, there's something, I think there is something to all this stuff, and I don't know if do you think we're projecting it, or do you think we're calling something? I don't know.
I think, some of it can be, especially, just your mindset will have to do with that. I think I manifest is everything. Manifest destiny. That whole that you hear about. So I think that there's definite truth to that, and that's something I've learned more and more the older I get. Because you catch yourself. Everybody's human. You've got your negative thoughts, you got your positive thoughts, and if you're constantly on your negative thoughts, then nothing ever good seems to happen. You kind of learn how to pull yourself out. So if you're constantly thinking good, like you mentioned earlier in the show, or no, you told me this before the show because I was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's true. It is. It's true.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely is. And I tell my kids, I have to remind them that all the time. I'm like, because they're young teenagers, and that's all they think about. Is, oh, well, I can't do this. I'm not good at that. But it's like, well, you're not going to be if you keep thinking like that, But there is truth to that.
I say the same thing to my son. I'm like, it's okay to fail. You learn something. Yeah. You can get back up and go at it again if it's what you really want. And you know what? I haven't been podcasting for a while. I just started this again, and some of my numbers are down in certain platforms, and I was kind of down about it. And my husband's like, you just got to keep going. You got to be positive. Yeah. That kind of thought, it won't happen. I'm like, oh, he's so right. Mm-hmm. My husband is so right. And actually, he made a comment. He's watching us now. He said, the universe will manifest what you're looking for, either positive or negative. Yeah. Thanks. Mm-hmm. Very awesome. Super awesome.
Very true.
So, yeah. Now, the history part.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You work with history all the time, and you have paranormal experiences alongside of it. When were you always interested in the past, or is that something you developed later?
Yes. I always have. My dad was, he was a history teacher for a while and librarian. So I just kind of grew up around loving history. It took me a while to really get into it. It was still later on in life to find myself interested in it, and especially where I work at now, because you kind of have to know the history when you're giving tours. You need to interlink history with the timeline. So that is something I've been working on. I've taken a lot of history courses here and there years ago, but I have to constantly remember things about the Civil War, at least Missouri history. That is something that I'm trying to keep up on. But my job, I really love it, and I'm lucky to even have it. I'm not full time or nothing, but maybe someday. But I enjoy learning the personal side to it. So when I give tours, it's not the kind of tour where you just go and, oh, this is this and that, we're going to hit this and then go to the next room, and not actually give the full extent of it. It's a very personal tour. Some of them can last up to 3 hours. I'm guilty of that. But that's how much I love the history. And I love it when at the end I've got somebody saying, wow, she goes, I've never even had a tour like that before, so that's really sweet. So I think that's what's really struck a chord with me. So now it's just I'm eager to learn it all. I want to know all of it, so that way I can understand what I'm telling all these people, especially, that timeline.
Well, I'm so excited for you that you actually get to do that. It's don't worry about it. I had the dog barking at the door last week, so it's all good.
Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good.
Teenager.
Yeah, teenager, and Jen's a top-notch mom, so it's all good. It's all good. But yeah, it's a little distracting, but it's all good. Kids, yeah. They got to express themselves. My poor son, I used to torture him during podcasts, shh, and then he would walk out. And I would see him, and he would pretend like he was going to creep on screen, and I'd be still talking, and I'd have my hand over going.
Yeah.
He would do that all the time. He would just try to tease me about it. So I totally get it. It's funny. So yeah, the history part, I was saying, I'm so glad that you get to do that, because, not a lot of people get to incorporate that in their work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm kind of actually surprised it was something that it's kind of been my calling, but I think a lot of that coincides with the fact that I'm very intuitive. The home is, well, I'm gonna have to watch what I say. It is state owned, so it's made out of limestone, like the whole building. and again, there's a lot of theories with limestone and place memory. And again, we kind of title this time loops and stuff like that. So that goes along with it as well. But, with the stone tape theory, supposedly you can, or unknowingly, you can place your own memories and thoughts, and it will be recorded into the limestone. And it will play back whenever, or maybe just on that certain date and time. And those are things that is heavily experienced there at that location.
I wonder if weather conditions too, or like there's like a sort of concoction of elements that come together whenever, and it sort of happens not necessarily on a date, but like when the sort of the elements, I'll say, are just perfect.
Yeah.
I often wonder that, because a lot of paranormal experiences are so fleeting. And when I see people trying to catch it on tape, I'm like, that's going to be very difficult because you just don't know.
Yeah, it's really, really hard. It's not really something we're supposed to do. So it's mostly just where I'm just giving a tour, and me and the visitors get to experience it. That's usually the number one question, but I'll always shoot it down because it's not what people would think of. Nowadays, when you watch TV, everything's like demonic, and it's always overdrawn and very full of actors. So I always kind of let people know that it's nothing like what they see on TV. It's just it's very simplistic. It's just a memory. It's just something that's just showing up here and there. You might hear a footstep, you might hear a door move. Something like that, but nothing bad.
Have you ever seen something visual, like you hear people say they've seen, besides, I know you said about your grandfather, but like in a location when you weren't expecting it? Have you ever seen a ghost? Some people report that.
At locations, I mostly see them just in my mind's eye. I've never really seen like a full legit apparition. If I have, I wasn't aware of it. It's not something where I'm like, oh, nope, nothing. I mean, like I've seen things where I just see like bits and parts, which is kind of weird too. Like I'll just see an arm. And I will question myself, was that in my mind's eye, or did I actually just see that arm? And normally when you do see it, it's not real like us. It's just kind of blurred, and you just happen to see it for a split second. That stuff I see. But
I've never actually seen anything. I've felt something like after my cat died, it walking across my head.
Yep.
Walking, like I felt it, like it was literally just like she would do, and it was this cold, icy, straight through my face. It was very strange. It was the strangest feeling. But when I lived in a Victorian house, it was footsteps. And nobody, like, it wasn't like creaking, like, oh, maybe it was a creak. It was literally someone would always walk upstairs and you could hear it really clearly and there would be nobody there. And it would just, but I've never actually seen something visually. I don't know if that's a really rare occurrence where the circumstances have to be right, or it's like a stone tape theory. Like, I don't know. Maybe we should go over some of the different theories about ghosts, about what they think it is, like, or how they're functioning or manifesting.
Well, I know there's some people that just experience it that aren't even intuitive whatsoever, or that don't know that they are. I mean, I think everybody has the opportunity to be psychic or a medium in any way. It just, just depends on what you believe in and whether or not you're willing to let yourself experience that. But I think there are glimpses in time where you're going to be able to experience it, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I know there's some people that have seen them and they're like, what the, and then they never see it again. It just, that was your time.
Yeah. That was your moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's interesting. So like the stone tape theory is basically like a recording of the event.
Yes.
What is a time loop?
Okay, so that is something that I've experienced, that I've been investigating. It's to where it's like parallel dimensions, multi-universe, that whole kind of thing, where we're existing and just alongside of somebody else, another dimension or person, family is existing as well. So I've captured a few EVPs where I've had something like that, where I'm not anywhere near that location. No one else is outside. Everybody else is somewhere else. And I'll just leave it, come back. And then when I review it, there's a literal conversation. And it's like as if they're in another room and it's muffled, but you can hear the inflection of the voice. You'll hear all the different people talking. You'll hear dogs barking. And I know when I first got it, I thought, well, somebody must have surely been around. And no one was, from what I knew, and then everybody else that was with me. So there's that. There is also where you recognize some of the voices.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a little freaky because those people have passed away. But yet you can hear them as if they're carrying on a conversation. But they're not aware of you. Yeah.
So yeah, they're operating almost like superimposed on where you are.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you have an EVP? Did you want to go there, or is that related to it? Or
if it's something that we can hear, because I know the one that I was trying to share with you, you have to have headphones on.
Okay, so I have. So for those of you who aren't listening, we're going to try and play this EVP here. I'm going to pop up the screen, and it's Jenn's screen, and hopefully she'll be able to play it, and hopefully we'll be able to hear it. If you can't, then we can't. But let's experiment and give it a try. This is an EVP.
Okay, let's hopefully that.
Turn your speakers up, people.
Let me make sure I've got this up.
Is it playing?
Yeah. Hang on a second. Nope.
It doesn't look like it's playing.
No, it's not.
Interesting. Okay. It didn't work. Oh, you stinker.
I wonder why it's not working. Like I move it. Oh. I'm moving it, and it's set, but it's not. I have it on another one. Like this is where I'll just stop sharing and I can share something else.
Here,
and it might work better.
I'll hide that and we can work that better. Well, you know what? Can't always win them all. They can't always have the positive thinking that wins them all. We'll bring that up later. But
okay.
So I mean, do you think the EVPs they're basically that kind of time loop or that sort of layering over? Like it really feels like people are just communicating, or are they answering your questions? Are they communicating with you?
No, not the ones that are just having a conversation.
Yeah.
No, they're still existing. Yeah, they're still existing in their own time. I mean, that's another thing too. Like, does time really exist? I mean, of course, to us it exists, but there's a big question on that too. Understanding time. So wherever they're at, they're existing where time matters to them, but it's completely different than our time. Like, I don't know.
There is that notion in quantum mechanics or physics that everything is happening all at once, and we just perceive a linear time frame and history, which makes your job as a historian very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced mimics too, and that's pretty cool. And I've had things mimic me. I haven't heard them myself, but I've been told that people have heard me talking, and I'm like, well, I wasn't in there. So I don't know what you heard. So
it's a phenomenon called a mimic.
Well, see, there's different type of mimics. You've got the ones that are supposedly tricksters, more your demonic side. I don't know. That's what you hear mostly, but it also could just be some other spirit that's just trying to get other people's attention, trying to scare the crap out of them too. But I've also experienced the ones where it's more of a recording, as if you're in a location that's already recording you, and it's just your voice is just coming out here and there. Maybe it's on that same day that you might have said something. Like it's constantly recording
Right.
things.
I have a comment from Scotty in the chat room. He said, "This is way beyond EVP. Maybe it's his experience. This has zero variables other than the government is messing with me. And I captured it perfectly in real time." Interesting.
Oh, cool.
That's interesting. Well, you know what? I think the government likes to mess with people. I have no doubt that that's part. So hopefully there's no governments messing with us and we're only capturing ghosts. Snake Style has said, another comment from the room, sometimes with tape and cassettes, one layer leaves an impression on another. It's called print through.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit like that with dimensions that exist contiguously.
Yeah.
Interesting. Sure. That's a good point too. Or like when you're taking a picture and you get a double negative.
Yep.
Very fascinating. Very fascinating. So mimics, we've got stone tape theory, we've got the sort of the time loop? Time loop.
Yeah.
Is there any, like, what about, like, I guess that would tie into stone tape theory about someone reliving an event. I was going to say that, but that would probably tie into stone tape theory, where someone's reliving some kind of tragic event that happened to them.
Well, I mean, I don't know if they're conscious of it. It just means that that's just a memory imprint. It's a place memory. There's all these different terms people use, but it was recorded and it plays over and over again at certain times, I guess. Yeah. So I've experienced a lot of that.
Do you have any spooky ones, like any experience you want to share with that like caught you off guard, or?
Nothing like super spooky. I have not had anything. I mean, I've had something touch me, tug on me at certain locations. I am starting to learn more intuitively when I feel a certain way that something's close by. I mean, I always feel like something's close by, period, no matter where I'm at. But when I'm in a haunted location, I started noticing I usually get really sick. And it doesn't mean whether or not it's a bad spirit or a good spirit. I just get sick. And that's usually my indicator. I've also tapped into a new type of, there's all these different kinds of clairs. So I have the, what's it, clairsentient? There's the one with the emotions, and there's also the one with the smell. And I get that a lot lately now. And I kind of find that interesting out of the blue. You just smell something. But it's cool. It's not just me. There's other people too that are smelling it too at this location. So
I got an interesting story. I kind of, you said that, and I really doubted it when it happened. So the other day, because I like history, I went, and because I had been on Dean Bertram's show, and I'm going on another show, and we were talking about serial killers and the paranormal, hauntings, and that kind of psychology. So I decided there's a house near here that they were trying to say that there's some kind of evil portal, and it was created by Ted Bundy, and I don't think it's necessarily true, but I thought I'm going to go. And I'm going to record the house. And I couldn't get in there. I just had to stand by the street. But I left, and I was on my way to go do the recording and track this house. And I started to get the migraine aura, my horrible migraines, and really, really sick before I got there. So my husband was like, "Oh, maybe it's the ghost." I'm like, "No, I wasn't there." But I'm like, okay, well, maybe I don't have to be there. Maybe it could just be because it knows, or something knows I'm coming. And it's like, don't go there. It wasn't a negative experience being there. But I literally was really, I recorded it. I stayed for as long as I could. I pushed it, but I was so sick. And these migraines are like the worst thing. You have to sit in the dark forever. And I had to come home. But it started, I'd stopped at the store just to grab some water and stuff. And bang, it just hit me out of nowhere while I was on my way to this location. And I thought, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I would definitely pay attention to it. Like every time you experience something like that way you just kind of document it, and that way you can learn whether or not that's something you need to pay attention to physically, or if that's something that's paranormal linked in some way.
Yeah. Do I have a brain tumor or is it a ghost?
Hopefully not.
I don't think
Hopefully it's a ghost. You want a ghost.
I'd rather a ghost.
You want it
Thank
to be
you
a
very
ghost.
much. Yeah. No, well, I mean, I've always gotten migraines, but usually it's from it is something in the environment, whether it's a light or smell or whatever that can trigger it. And I was like, it just hit me and I was like, that's really weird. I'm on my way to this house.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes I think that even though that house may have never had Ted Bundy anywhere near it, sometimes I think the population, creates such a myth about it. He might as well gone there.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
There is something called egregores and tulpas, and that is something that you manifest on your own, just from storytelling, and they become real entities. So yeah, most actually haunted locations. So you can actually just buy an old house, right? And just tell people, oh, it's haunted because that's the new thing, and people will start investigating. Well, make up a few stories, and this would be a really cool project to do, and just start making up a bunch of different stories to make sure you're always saying it over and over and over and over again. And I'm pretty sure that would show up in the house. And that is you're manifesting it. You're manifesting your tulpas. Now, I think egregores are a little different. That is something that you should be, well, actually, I think both you're supposed to be able to control, but you don't. Egregores is just a little bit further than that. That's more of a God manifestation, I think. But
interesting. I never heard of that before.
Yeah.
What was that? Cool. It was egregore?
Egregores, yeah.
Interesting. So manifesting, oh, well, I can imagine that we're manifesting some very interesting gods in our society today. Spooky gods. Tech gods.
Yeah, the whole AI thing kind of scares shit out of me, that's for sure.
Yeah. I know. I'm not looking forward to it. I certainly like Elon Musk, but I'm not wearing his Neuralink brain chips.
Oh yes, I've been watching that.
The transhumanism.
That's scary.
It is scary. I mean,
yeah.
So I had a friend on one of my first podcasts when I came back. She's lovely. They run a podcast called Nox Mente. And she was literally telling me, going into AI, it's really hard for me to explain because it was really deep and it comes from her thoughts. And, I don't think I could ever compete with her level, to be quite honest. But she implied that eventually we are the ghosts. We will be the ghosts. Like the AI is going to take over, and we are the ghosts. And I was like really quiet for a few seconds, and I had to digest that. It's interesting. So this idea that we're the ghosts, and this whole transhumanism concept, I thought, oh wow.
Yeah. Well, the Ghost Seer app that I use, I've been using the Ghost Tube it's probably my second year, like every day. It's an everyday thing because
for people who don't know, what is the Ghost Tube or Ghost Seer app?
Tube. So that was created by Amy and Jared from Australia. They have their own show. Yep.
Yes, I know Amy's Crypt.
Yep. They're the ones that came up with it. Yeah, they came up with that. So it actually started off with a bundle. It's like Ghost Tube, Vox, which is supposed to be like a little spirit box, and then their own little SLS. And it was just recently this year, I think it was about March or April when it came out, and it was called Seer. So this is an AI, and it's AI generated. So they're supposed to be able to, spirits are supposed to be able to put some words together, and then it will generate a picture. And I've been using that all year. And so far, at a location, it's dead on every single time with the history. And then if I get something that I don't understand, that's when I dive deep and try to learn more about the property. But it always seems to link up, and I find that very crazy. So I don't know if that's more of an AI thing too, because I mean, it's a computer anyways, right? So is it getting your location, and it could probably figure out what happened there, but that's pretty far and intense, but at the same time, it's something to think about.
Well,
Um,
and you gotta like it would be interesting to see the code and see that if it knows your location, if it's Google searching some like it's
mhm.
got some kind of Google
Yeah,
search that it grabs some words and
yeah.
that's why it is a little jumbled and it just spits out words.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand code, so they don't know how the app is working.
Mhm.
I actually, when I did my graphic design degree, I had to take classes making mobile apps. So I'm like, oh, it's in the code. Right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, but I mean, it's interesting that it gives you those kind of answers, and I like that you're experimenting with it
Mhm.
regardless.
Yeah. And I take it wherever I go. So even with the ghost tube, I've got way more time with it, but um, it does generate different pictures everywhere. You know, it's not always the same picture, but when I'm at a certain location, I do get the same type, and the location that I'm at is whoever's been there's well over 200-300 years. So there is a lot of information
Wow.
held on that property, but
Well, and
it's
I mean, the other thing is Google doesn't have everything. Everybody
no,
is
that's
so
true.
set on Google. It doesn't have everything. There's probably a lot of information
It's true.
Google doesn't have yet.
Hmm. Oh, I do have one that's very interesting. It is on my TikTok. Um, I was actually at an investigation, and I'll have to give a name drop. So it is with the Beyond Life Paranormal Research. So I just started doing investigations with them, and I was invited to go to one of those. And I started getting some pictures, and I automatically thought it had something to do with the location. And it's a little bit personal too. Maybe some of my family members may not want me saying it, but either way, uh, it was an eye opener to me. It was very fascinating. So I started getting the first picture was like of an angel, and I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. And then so we were just sitting there for a while. And then I got something else that came up, and it was like a group of people. And it looked kind of scary at first because I couldn't tell because it takes a while to form. And finally, it looked more like a heavenly picture. And then another one generated. And this one definitely looked like a heavenly picture. It had all the nice little pastel colors. And off on the side was this massive, big type of angel that was forming. And then you have all these really pretty colors in between. And then on the other side, you've got a staircase. And at the staircase are these people, and they're waving. Like, and I thought, oh, well, that's where they want to go, thinking at the location. Well, during that,
Right.
I got a phone call from one of my cousins. And I'm like, well, I can't answer it right now because I was at the investigation and I would have had to leave. And I kind of already knew what it was. So I thought it was. So I just ignored it. And then when I got out into my car, I listened to the message that my cousin left me, which was very sad.
Mhm.
My cousin had passed away, a
I'm
different cousin
sorry.
that had been really sick with cancer for quite a while. So um, after I went back and made a video out of it and TikTok out of it, I was just like, that's what if that was just either not necessarily him because he was still young in the transition, but I mean, like
Right.
somebody else that was a family member was maybe trying to get a message across, letting me know that someone dear to me was passing away at the time. And so they were sending me angel pictures and heavenly pictures and all of that. And because I got three in a
Mhm.
row, normally it doesn't happen like that. So, and it was exactly at the time that it happened.
Wow.
So that one's kind of
I've heard
freaky.
that a lot from other people where they've gotten these really weird synchronicities, like they'll be driving and that person died at the same time and on the radio their favorite song showed up.
Yeah. Hmm.
Stuff like that. So it's interesting to see that that can happen in different elements.
Hmm. Yep. Hmm.
I'm trying to think if
I've
I've ever had that happen, but I'm not sure.
I've had it. Well, my brother Chris passed away in 2009, and it was
Sorry.
nonstop for the first 5 years. It was always by song. I don't film as much as I used to, but when he does show up, I automatically know he's there. So
Wow.
it's a nice feeling. It's a nice feeling, and it does make you rethink a lot of things that you're told. at least for me as I was growing up. So
Right, with the religious context, because
yeah,
I know in Christians, and I have probably a lot of people who are Christians watching on X, that they tend to believe like once you die, that's it. You can't come back.
yes,
You can't communicate. You
hmm
have to have permission from God, and I understand that, respect that, but
hmm
I don't know. I think some things happen, and people do communicate with you, and if the universe is something like everything's happening all at once, and
hmm
or things are laying on top with different energies, I don't see why, even maybe they're not a body or the same human anymore, but why they can't send that energy and that communication.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what we're all supposed to be, is just energy anyways. I don't see why they wouldn't be able to. Especially if you think about that whole one consciousness thing too, which I'm still learning more about that since I'm a newbie to that stuff. But it makes sense though. It
Yeah,
does. But
that it's all happening
yeah.
all on top.
hmm
Yeah, and I always try to be respectful. I mean, I used to have a lot of occult people coming on the show, and that's when I had the weirdest, creepiest stuff happening in my life. And once I got rid of a lot
Oh,
of the crazy occult stuff,
yeah.
it started weeding. Like there's some occult stuff, and then there's people who are in the occult for really not very good reasons. And those
Yeah.
people, I was like, bye bye. Like they're in it for a power trip and a weird,
Oh,
sexual
yeah.
obsession, or they've got
hmm
some creepy thing going on in their own vibe. I had to like
hmm
learn how to sort those people out, and that can be really difficult. But
hmm
I don't know. It's interesting. I wonder if when you're doing your tours, um, obviously have when you're telling your stories and you're doing your tours with people, have you had something happen that was really extreme? You don't have to say anything really specific, and that like everybody, the whole group was like, oh, or is it always just subtle?
It's always pretty subtle. I mean,
Hmm.
you hear things here and there. I think one time a door opened, but I'm not the only one that experienced that one. Now, I have left an app on while I give my
Yes.
tours.
Hmm.
It's the investigator, and I can't help myself. And I'll get curious, and then I'll hit the record button. I'll leave it in my pocket, and then I'll review it afterwards, just to see if something was said when I was telling a certain story. And I've had things come up, and it automatically matches, and
And
it'll say yes or no.
it's
Yeah,
engaging with
yeah.
what you're saying.
And they seem to like the tours, from what I've caught. And that's if it is something that's like aware and intelligent. I don't know what's going on, but it's just a
That's
huge mystery.
interesting.
But that's like with any location though that you're constantly telling stories at, though, because you kind of really have to watch out what kind of stories you're telling, because again, at the whole tulpas, you're manifesting things. So I always
Hmm.
make
Hmm.
sure when I do tell my stories that they're all good, and that I'm sharing information that is helpful for that family. And it's very personal. I'm not going to share any like crazy negative stuff. That's just not something I'm going to do.
Oh,
But
just giving a shout out for Beyond Life Paranormal Research. Russell's in the
oh
room. Thank
yes,
you, Russell. Beyond Life Paranormal Research.
yes.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
I'm glad to have you in the room, Russell. Yeah, it's interesting because I've had guests on from the United Kingdom, and you can imagine the energy there in some of the locations. And
Oh my
I think
gosh.
he was recording in a different room, and he had people doing something else, and he caught this weird garbled voice on EVP, but they experienced it in some different way, and that he didn't make the connection at first, but when they heard a garbled voice, and then he was in a different part, and it came up on his EVP as something really clear, and he made the connection that for some people it sounded like that, but it was showing up at the same time on his recording, and I don't know how he said they were linked. It would be interesting to have. I'm actually going to get him on and talk about that again. But he had some kind of theory, and it was about like kind of David Icke and like how you cannot see certain spectrums and we're unable to, they're there. And so
Oh,
you had
yeah.
that, like it's parallel, but he has, it's a frequency we just can't see. And it's showing up distorted in weird ways, but certain people are seeing the frequency. And I don't know, it was really fascinating how he caught the voice. And a weird thing happened, but he caught the voice at the same time. And it was totally responding, and it was pissed off to what they were doing or something like that.
Wow. So it was aware. That's always cool when you get something that's aware. Like the things that I've caught, the recent EVPs, that I'm really working on those because there's a lot of road noise in them. But you can literally hear people talking. And it, to me, I reckon, again, it's my intuition. I recognize some of the voices, and it's people that actually lived in that building, but it's two separate couples. And one of the voices I actually recognized just because I've heard their voice on a recording that was done years ago. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's her. But I swear she said my name though. So I got to clear it up. She said it twice. She sounded a little concerned. It was Jenn. And then Jenn. And I'm like, what? So I got to clear it up. Like and there's another man talking to her, and he's got a really low voice, and they're just having this discussion. And I'm like, what in the world? And what's cool is that before it happens, like I'll say what I'm doing, I'll leave it, and then you can hear me shut the door. And then the next thing you know, the frequency literally switches. You hear this high pitched weird noise, and then boom, you can hear it. And I don't know what that is. And it's only with those, the ones that happen that are kind of more like your time loops or your parallel dimensions or multi-universe, whatever you want to call it. But
so I've got another UK story, if you don't mind me telling it.
Sure, yeah.
So my stepsister lived in the United Kingdom for a year. She spent 6 months in London and 6 months in Edinburgh. I would always talk about ghosts when we were young, and she never believed me. She thought I was full of horse poo, whatever, until she went to England herself. And she had met these people in Australia, and they told her, if you're ever in England, you can come stay. We have basically 2 townhouses, old ones or whatever, side by side. One was my grandmother's and one's ours, and you can come and stay. So she was over in England, and she was staying in one of the townhouses. And she told me, she goes, I've never had anything weird, but I was always scared of this hallway, and I would race through it whenever I had to go to the bathroom at night. And one night she got up from her room, and she was really thirsty, and she races through this hallway thinking there's something there. And she goes into the kitchen, and she opens the fridge door that they have, and she's getting some water to drink. And all of a sudden, right behind her, she said, all the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. And she heard this,
oh my God.
In her ear, right in her ear. And she's looking around, and there's nothing there. And she screamed, and she's looking around, and there's nothing there. And it was she goes, it felt like it was giving me heck, and it was shushing me, but I couldn't make it out. I couldn't make the sound. It was blah, 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 like garbled radio. And I was like, what the hell? And she's like, so I freaked out and went to bed. I was totally terrified because she's kind of, and she didn't know whether to tell them or not the next day. She was so kind of embarrassed about it because it frightened her. And she finally told them what happened. They're like, oh, that's me, Nan. She was pissed off because you were standing with the door open in the fridge. This part of the condo was her condo. This is where she lived. She comes back all the time. Don't worry about it. Just don't leave the fridge open. And my stepsister was like, I can't handle this. I can't take this old woman stalking me around the house. It freaked her right out. I believed her. She was genuinely a skeptic. She thought I was crazy, and she had that experience, and that was it. She was a believer, and it scared her. And I thought, well, that feels like it's conscious. It's watching you. It's actually interacting with what you're doing.
Oh yeah. Especially over in UK. I mean, that's definitely got longer, deeper history than the United States of America does.
Well, and this wasn't even an old ghost, from we're not. This is the Nan that had died 20 years before, right? But they're living in probably a townhouse that's hundreds of years old.
Right.
On top of it. So who knows what else is happening there.
Yeah. And what's it made out of? So, stone, anything like that definitely can hold that energy in. It's
Yeah, I
very
don't know.
interesting.
Those are questions I didn't ask. I didn't ask her. Snake Style. We have lots of ghosts over here in the UK, so we
Yeah.
have a UK listener. Thank you, Snake Style. That's awesome. Yeah, it's phenomenal. No, I've been to the UK and I never had an outright experience, but the place I was staying in, my friend's house, I always felt like someone was watching me, and it was
Mm,
an old townhouse in a suburb of
yeah.
London.
Oh,
I
cool.
did. Yeah, so it's interesting, and how I like. I don't want to get into details about where you work, but I'm assuming it's fairly old, and so like and but like Snake Cell says, I mean, it's so old there, and there's so many
Yeah.
layers. Who knows? You're bound to have that
Yeah.
experience, but I
Yeah.
hope I never have an old lady shushing me while I drink water. I'll tell you that. So we're getting close to the hour.
Mhm.
Well, actually, we're
Oh,
over the hour, Jen.
yeah.
But
Okay.
I'm gonna before we tune out, we discussed the whole thing. Do you have a favorite kind of ghost story or myth that's from your area or a haunted location where there's a mythology or anywhere really that spooks you out that you want to share or any kind of
Mm.
experience before we take off?
Well, I live in Missouri, so it is the cave state. So again, this goes a lot with I guess it's more like a mythological or traditions with the indigenous peoples. Um, to them, caves were more of your underworlds, or it also was a shelter, of course. But that was a way for you to have the interlink of the in between as well. So uh, this does go along with where the area where I work at, not necessarily the building or anything, but that is something else that I've experienced quite a bit there. And just seeing little things, you'll see lights in the sky, which could also mean what's in the earth. Limestone sometimes carries quartz, just depends on what minerals and gems could be in the ground. But lights just seem to just form, orbs kind of fly around. And it's not necessarily even that. I think the whole area where I live, or at least maybe in Pettis County, I don't know. I used to live south of town, and I would experience strange lights all the time too. So, I mean, there's a lot of different stories with that. Little people. You've also got like all the different Bigfoot stories too. Missouri's full of those as well. The Beeman monster isn't that far away from
Mm-hmm.
where I work or where I used to live, so there's that
There's
too. But there's tons of
a
them.
lot of phenomena that
Yeah.
happens out in nature.
Oh yeah, for sure. And your elementals, that is something else that I've experienced too. So those are
I
quite
I
interesting.
first heard about an elemental from an Irish ghost haunted castle. I'd never heard about them, so it's really interesting that you
Wow.
have stuff like that.
Hmm.
I'm in Utah right now, and we've got like Skinwalker
Oh,
Ranch and crazy
yeah.
stuff like that.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, I have never been up there yet. I've heard about it. I've watched stuff on it.
Oh,
So
you gotta go. Shoot.
apparently there's some strange stuff going on.
Uh-huh.
We're actually doing a ghost hunt in February at this old city hall building for I don't know 6 hours or whatever.
Ooh,
So
that sounds like fun.
exciting, exciting. All right, well I really appreciate you coming on the show,
Sure,
Jen. It was
sure.
wonderful. I hope you come
Anytime.
back.
Oh,
Hope you come
yeah.
back. I've let people know where your TikTok. Is there anywhere else where people can find you? Because I besides TikTok, or do you have anywhere?
I just do some social media, Facebook,
Perfect.
Instagram. So, yeah.
Perfect. Well,
Mhm.
I'll pop that back up. You guys can follow Jen. She is the karaoke ghost hunter
Yeah.
over at TikTok. She's got some really cool videos, and she does that ghost app, the Ghost Tube, and everything. And have a look at that. Um, thank you. I'm going to put you in the green room. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
We're going to tie this up. Um, that was great. That was a fantastic show, everybody. Next week, Emily Menshouse, conspiracy theorist queen, I call her. She's coming on, and we're going to be talking about the end of days kind of thing. There's this new Netflix series with Julia Roberts and Ethan Hawke in it, and she's got some theories about a lot of this end of the day stuff that's happening and end of the world. And we'll hear from Emily next week. I want to thank you guys for showing up in the room. We got some great people: Daryl, Scotty, Snake Sal, Russell, We had some really great interaction today. I hope you guys come back next Tuesday. I'm having Emily. I think it's roughly around the same time. It's in the YouTube, so you'll see it there. But I want to thank you guys very much. And I'm going to sign off. Ghostly Archives. Remember, visit that site, ghostlyarchives.com, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Adios.